Some breaking news regarding Anthony Scaramucci and the sale of his investment firm SkyBridge. Just days after the hedge fund manager lined up a top job in the Trump administration, he struck a multi-million-dollar deal to sell part of his firm SkyBridge to a little-known company called Ron Transatlantic. Bloomberg has been reporting on this, and we bring in Zach for some details. So the story has just crossed on the Bloomberg. For those of our customers who want to look at it, it's available there on the Bloomberg. Tell us what we found out.
Sure. So Anthony Scaramucci, as he was getting ready to go to the White House to be a top advisor to Donald Trump, he also arranged to sell his company, SkyBridge Capital, which is sort of a well-known fund-of-funds manager. And the buyers are a very interesting group. There's HNA, which is a Chinese conglomerate, and then this other company called Ron Transatlantic, which very few people had ever really heard of before.
Okay, so when you look at this and from your reporting standpoint, what is curious to you? Does this look like a vanilla sale, or is there something that stands out?
It caught the attention of a lot of analysts we spoke to because the price seemed higher than we typically see for a kind of fund-of-funds transaction. And the other
That's
thing
the $180 million.
That's right. That's right. And then the other thing is that this company, Ron Transatlantic, is kind of a mystery. Scaramucci told us today that he doesn't know who the actual investors are behind Ron.
Wait, he sold it to a company where he doesn't know the investors?
That's what he told us today. But what we do know is that Ron previously owned a stake in his company, and that stake was actually owned by a man from Venezuela named Danilo Diaz-Granados, who was kind of had close contacts with the government of Hugo Chavez.
Now, this is just to clarify something that he wanted to do to free himself up to be a part of the administration.
That's right. So he was at the same time kind of working out what role he would have in the Trump administration and also selling his company, which he founded in 2005, to sort of free himself up, not have these conflicts of interest.
So how exactly did he meet up with these buyers if he doesn't really know who they are? I mean, how is this determined?
Right. So he knows the guy who kind of runs Ron, who's a man who was born in New York but actually grew up in Venezuela. He says he's known him for 20 years. Ron was a longtime investor in SkyBridge, but the actual economic ownership of that stake up until very recently was this gentleman, Mr. Diaz-Granados.
Now, when you go about buying his structure of his fund, well, I guess just break it down for us real quickly. It's basically a fund of funds, right? And then how do they go about figuring out how to value that type of company?
Sure. So when you talk to analysts or investment bankers who buy and sell these kind of companies, you try to compare it to something like normalized EBITDA or net operating income. And on those metrics, Scaramucci told us today the number he thinks that is accurate is about 7.2 times that earnings number.
Right.
And the analysts we talked to say a more common number is more like 3 to 5.
Huh. Very interesting.
But no, it's important to point out though that Scaramucci says this is a unique asset. It has a distribution channel that no other fund of funds has, and so it deserves a higher valuation than a typical transaction.
And the transaction value SkyBridge at 7.2 times normalized EBITDA. What were we saying was the average, or where it? Other
analysts we talked to said that when you see fund of funds change hands, it's usually in the range of 3 to 5.
Oh, wow.
Now, when he's that value add that he says the fund of funds, what exactly does that mean, though? Is it about the clients that they're with? Is it about the actual funds that they've invested in? They've picked the best ones. What is it?
It really is a unique business in the sense that SkyBridge has 41,000 kind of not quite mom and pop investors, but as Scaramucci says, dentists who might have $25,000 or $50,000 invested with him. They in turn, he can make those investments into top hedge funds that otherwise you'd have to have, $5 or $10 million just to qualify. So it's kind of this distribution channel, this access to thousands of investors, almost kind of like retail
Takes
investors.
them all, puts them together, gets into the amount that you can then enter a hedge fund, and puts that in, and returns, obviously brings those returns back down.
That's right, and that's the argument for why this should command a premium price compared to a typical fund of funds.